Hey, hi, good afternoon. Can I share my screen?
Sure.
Yeah. I need to get the, yeah, all right. Okay, just hold on, yeah. All right, can you see? All right, okay. So I will be sharing with everyone today on my dissertation topic, which is learning at telecentres and indigenizing instructional design. So basically, like, there's disparities among communities that have access to ICTs in Sarawak is actually very, very apparent in places that are very remote, especially looking at our own Sarawak terrain, in the highlands and of Barrio, Baklalan, Long Lamai, and a lot of other rural areas. The connection for the internet is actually very, very slow and very limited. So looking at the initiatives that the governments have taken worldwide, the most widely rolled out has actually been the telecentre. And when looking at the literature, most of the research or evaluations of the telecentre has focused on user acceptance, development, sustainability of the telecentre, and impact assessment. However, there's been very I find is particularly relevant, especially among indigenous communities who have got their own ways of learning, they have got their own processes, their own ways of sharing formal setting. So and what they prioritize and their criteria as to what actually learning means, the Western perspective. So to date, the literature has shown that how indigenous ways of learning can be used in classrooms. So as you can see in the literature coming from places like Australia, Alaska, America, the Northern Americas, and but research has on the usage of these instructional design methods in telecentres is still very limited and is worthy to be explored. So my current study looks at finding out, I was concentrating on 3 main telecentre sites in Sarawak, in the highlands of Borneo, which is located in Barrio and Baklalan, as well as Long Lamai, and to find out what kind of instructional design models were implemented at these telecentres was during the initial rollout of the telecentres. And then after that, to examine if a cultural inclusive design would be more beneficial for the community members, and if it can encourage them to share their knowledge and to co-create their knowledge with one another, as well as to look at the merits of using such a design and indigenized instructional design in telecentres and the role that the telecentre has today in supporting these learning needs of the community members. So my research used primarily a qualitative method of investigation, where I interviewed members from the project team who initiated the ICT literacy program, as well as a MOOCs project that was conducted at 2 of the selected research sites in Sarawak, as well as the indigenous community that was implemented recently, as well as participants of a pilot test for the MOOCs, which is members of the public, which are not from those 3 localities, but they're also from indigenous communities. And the study used a culture-based model framework to examine the ICT literacy training program that was rolled out at the telecentres initially, and then comparing it to the framework which looks at the different elements of culture and how it can be used in such training programs. And then it was compared to the MOOCs program that was subsequently implemented at the sites. And what I examined was the areas that were inadequately addressed during the training sessions, particularly in terms of using culturally specific instructional strategies, assessments, as well as artifacts of their history and their knowledge of the Indigenous communities themselves, which are their priorities. So this was a two-pronged research. So the findings from the first phase, which answered my first research question, was it took on the trainings at the program at the telecentre sites took on an ADDIE model form of instructional design. And it was recognized that not all of the aspects of the culture-based model was addressed in this. And then the trainers stated that these are probably things that they should have looked at when they were designing the program, and it should be looked at when they are for future trainings that will be conducted with the communities at these sites. And from the community members themselves, they said that they were very motivated to learn about ICT literacy because it was very new for them. However, they felt like it was knowledge that they didn't need to share with anybody, so they were not compelled to do it because, let's say, to them it was, yeah, we do know how to use it, we learned how to do it, but we're only going to use it at the telecentre. We're not going to do it outside of the telecentre. So it does not, I don't think I need to share with my neighbors or my friends on how I need to do it, because if they want to learn, they can go to the telecentre and learn. So there's no motivation to share or co-create the knowledge there. And also because they felt like when they were at the telecentre, they just needed to go to the trainer. So the trainers were the ones that had to teach, whereas for them, they were just recipients. So this was what I found from two of the sites. But however, the third site showed that they had higher levels of intrinsic motivation to share and co-create the knowledge. And when I questioned further into like, why was this a different response towards the training sessions, they said that it was because they had conducted trainings outside of the scheduled trainings, because they felt like some of the community members did not understand, and some of them missed out on the trainings. So they were like, for community benefit, let's get together and we have our own sessions, whereby, but they didn't have it in a classroom setting. So it was not like what they did at the telecentre, but it was where they got together, they sat down together, and then they had discussions. And they had knowledge, I mean, they had sharing sessions, how they felt about it, what do they want to learn, how do they want to do it, which was also a lot more closer to what they usually practice when they are learning within the community. So it shows that when you, like for this community particularly, when you have got elements of community learning practices, the motivation to learn and to share knowledge is actually heightened, strengthened, which led to my second question. I mean, and then it showed that they wanted the trainings to be conducted in their own native language, and that the content should be contextualized to their lives, because they said, as I mentioned earlier, ICT literacy is good, but it's not completely relevant to their own lives unless they can contextualize it or use it. And they wanted to have opportunities to practice what they learned together and to share their thoughts with one another instead of just having a class. And they wanted to use less formal ways of learning, because that's how they were accustomed to learning in a community. And they were more interested in programs that were catered towards their priorities and their interests, such as knowledge preservation, to learn more about the cultures of other communities, and to see whether it and how they can use it in their own community. So based on what I've gathered from the participants of my study, I looked at how we can use, take their feedback, and then look at what in the literature, what researchers are saying that we should practice in communities of learning for Indigenous communities, and and adapting what their requirements are, and using the feedback from the committees to complement those requirements. And I used self-determination theory to look at whether their intrinsic motivation would be strengthened if you use such an instructional design. And it was found that the intrinsic motivation was strengthened when the programs took on a more community approach. So when there was more involvement of the community members, and when there were cultural elements present, as well as when it was regarding topics that they were interested in, such as health and like cooking and even agricultural methods of planting paddy and everything, they were more interested and they were more likely to share their knowledge with one another. And this was also not just seen among the participants from the two of the research sites that I went to. It was also seen in the pilot study of the MOOCs, where, what do you call that? The participants were interested in creating their own MOOCs when they saw what the respondents did in the two sites. Just to give, I realized that I did not talk about what the MOOCs was. It was basically like a different kind of MOOC in the sense that instead of having a lecturer or an academic lead the topic of discussion, it was actually conducted by the community members themselves. So they created their own modules. They came up with what they wanted to learn and how they wanted to teach. And then a lot of it came out through like phases of storytelling, where they shared with one another. And then they made their own videos on how, like say, to make beading, how while they were sharing on how they did the beads, they would actually tell the story behind it and the significance of it. And this was very interesting and then these two communities, they exchanged such videos. And what I observed during this exchange was that when one community saw the other community doing it on the video, they immediately amongst themselves would start to exchange ideas, and they would say that, oh, we have done this before, and this is what we can do, and this is another thing that we can look at. So there was that they were very interested in developing different ideas based on what they saw. And they wanted to share it with the other community as well, to say that maybe this can be done. So it was very active in that sense. Okay, and in looking at how the telecentres have a role to play in this kind of exchange, is that UNESCO has stated that the future of the telecentre is no longer just a place where you can learn ICT literacy. However, it has to now place greater emphasis on learning and skills development, and so it should be able to meet the local needs of the community, and it should also address issues such as community involvement and provide relevant courses and seminars to the community, which was all these three aspects were addressed in the MOOCs program that was initiated at the two of the sites. And based on the findings of the study, there is potential for the telecentres to become training centres for these, particularly for Indigenous communities, as well as to draw them together to participate in learning activities, which is another way of looking at how to make the telecentres more sustainable for the community. And it can also become as a hub for knowledge preservation and documentation, which is a role that has been recognized by UNESCO as part of the future of the telecentre. And through the implementation of such a instructional design, community involvement is also potentially heightened, and it will increase and strengthen their motivation to share their knowledge and to co-create knowledge with one another. I think this is the last of the slides. Yeah, that's all I have for today. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jaya. So is there anyone who has questions for Jaya?
Jaya.
Yep.
Yeah, Lilian. Actually, just a comment.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sure you're aware that we have a lot of Pusat Internet Malaysia.
Yes.
I think your studies would what you've done for this particular study would be very good to actually replicate something like that for our PIN, for Malaysia, to see how it could actually play the role that you have mentioned, since it's available in so many of the areas in Sarawak. Another one is, I think you're also aware that the Sarawak government has set up the DCC, or the Digital Community Centres.
Yep.
I think about 40 of them throughout the state as well. And this again is also in relation to the findings of the study. This would be particularly useful as well in terms of looking at how the DCC could actually play the role that you have mentioned as well. And the need to ensure that it does play this role, because these are actual findings from the ground, and we need to take the really interest and priorities of the communities concerned into consideration, especially when we look at the roles that these DCCs can actually play. So I think your study will be very important to share also with the state government as well.
Yeah, that is definitely something that I think could be beneficial. So hopefully in the future, once I'm done, I'll be able to share with everybody.
Yes, and please share them with me as well.
Definitely.
I will be able to share it also with the different authorities as well who are very much involved in this area. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jaya, for your wonderful presentation.